Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're on a mission to connect some seemingly disparate worlds. We're talking philosophy of desire, Silicon Valley strategy, even 17th century courtesans, and how it all ties into healthy relationships.
It's huge math.
It is, and it all boils down to one core question. Why does rivalry consume us? And is there a way to strategically design a life where competition is just irrelevant?
And that's exactly what our listener, the learner, is looking for clarity on how these dense topics actually intersect. In this deep dive, we're going to synthesize René Girard's ideas on rivalry, Peter Thiel's business strategy, and the psychology behind desire and conflict.
Right.
The goal here is to give you a full picture of how rivalry starts, and more importantly, how you can escape its most destructive forms by creating a kind of monopoly on value. And that value could be anything: profit, power, or even personal intimacy.
I love that framing, a monopoly on value. Because our sources show this isn't just about business competition.
No, not at all.
The rivalry, it seems, starts so much deeper than we think.
Which leads directly to the core question we have to answer. Why do we so often desire exactly what other people desire? And if that's the root of all conflict, what happens when you try to build a life completely outside of that competitive game?
Okay, let's unpack that foundational idea, René Girard's concept of mimetic desire.
Yeah.
This is the source material that really influenced contrarians like Peter Thiel.
It is.
And the idea, which is so revolutionary but so simple, is that most of our desires, they're not even ours to begin with.
Exactly. It completely upends the way you think about what you want. We tend to believe, we see a car, a job title, a certain kind of partner, and we want it for its own qualities.
Right.
Girard says no. You want it because someone else, a model, a competitor wants it first. You're imitating their desire. It's the imitation, not the intrinsic value that's driving you.
So we're not even looking at the thing itself. We're looking at what our rival wants. That explains so much about status symbols.
It does.
The object is almost secondary to the fact that everyone knows it's desired.
Exactly. And when you define yourself against your rival, the object becomes less and less important. The conflict itself takes over. And if I want the same thing as you, and we're both modeling our desire off some third party, a celebrity, a trendsetter, we become what Girard calls twin rivals.
And the rivalry itself is the only thing that matters.
It consumes you both.
Right.
And the consequence of all this escalating desire is, immediate and pretty terrifying conflict.
Which could destabilize entire communities.
Precisely. In early societies, Girard argued that this conflict spiral, this war of all against all, had to be channeled somewhere to stop it from tearing the community apart. So the aggression gets directed onto a single, often totally arbitrary target.
Scapegoat.
The scapegoat.
That idea is so unsettling. Are you saying that societies just have to have an outlet for violence? That scapegoating is a conflict management tool?
Historically, yes. By punishing or getting rid of the scapegoat, the communal tension is discharged, unity is temporarily restored, and the community forgets the internal conflict that started the crisis.
So the problem isn't solved, it's just displaced.
It's displaced.
Okay, so if rivalry and scapegoating are just baked into human nature, how does someone like Peter Thiel, operating in hyper-competitive Silicon Valley, propose we escape this cycle?
Well, Thiel's entire strategic framework is a conscious attempt to just sidestep mimetic rivalry. His famous statement, "competition is for losers," isn't just bluster.
No, it's a real philosophical position.
It is. He believes that if you're in a fierce competition, say two startups fighting over the same tiny market, you are trapped in that mimetic war, and you're just driving all the value and profit down to zero.
But wait, isn't competition supposed to be healthy for the market? Why is he so dismissive of it?
Because he sees it as a massive distraction that just encourages imitation. He makes this distinction between horizontal and vertical progress.
Right, 1 to N versus 0 to 1.
Exactly. If everyone is doing 1 to N horizontal progress, they're just copying things that already work. They're fighting over a known quantity. Thiel believes real progress comes from vertical progress, 0 to 1.
Doing something completely new.
Finding a secret that nobody else has discovered, and if you build something 0 to 1, you automatically create a monopoly because you literally have no rivals.
That makes perfect sense. Building the 1,000th car is horizontal.
1 to N.
But building the first iPhone, that was vertical. 0 to 1.
You're escaping the gravitational pull of imitation. And Thiel says the secret to finding those opportunities is to be radically contrarian. It's about asking yourself, what important truth do very few people agree with me on?
That's the entry point to your monopoly.
Yes.
It reminds me of that fantastic exchange when Jeff Bezos criticized him. He said something like, Peter Thiel is a contrarian. first and foremost. You just have to remember that contrarians are usually wrong.
And Thiel's response was so crucial. He said, contrarians may be mostly wrong, but when they get it right, they get it really right.
Because if you're looking where everyone else is looking, the value's already gone.
It's been competed away. The valuable secrets are hidden because they defy consensus, or they're in places where the social model, the person everyone is copying, is just unwilling to go.
So if mimetic desire is the psychological root, then game theory is sort of the structural rules of the game.
It maps the battlefield. It shows how that rivalry plays out in our lives, professionally and personally.
Let's get into that structural logic then, starting with the two big ones, zero-sum and positive sum.
A zero-sum game is pretty simple. My win has to be your loss. Think of poker. There's a finite pot of money. And when people perceive resources to be scarce, everything defaults to zero-sum.
We see that in politics all the time. It feels like one side can only win if the other side loses everything.
And it just exacerbates conflict because there's absolutely no incentive to collaborate.
But I think it's important to clarify that zero-sum is sometimes just the perception of scarcity, right? It's not always the reality.
Absolutely. The scarcity often starts in our heads, driven by that mimetic desire for the same thing. But the structural outcome is real conflict. What we should be aiming for are positive-sum games.
Where we make the pie bigger for everyone.
Right. Long-term collaborations where both sides can gain value. But that requires trust and a focus on unique shared experiences that can't just be taken away.
The negative side of this is so clear in corporate culture. Things like mandated internal competition, like stack ranking.
Oh, that's a classic example of deliberately creating a zero-sum game. Stack ranking, or ranking yang, forces employees to compete because there are only so many slots for the top rating.
So you're incentivized to undermine your peers.
Completely. It sabotages learning, it stifles innovation, and it promotes gaming the system instead of actually working toward the company's goals. The structure itself dictates the morality, and the morality becomes survival.
Now we can see that play out in structured finite games like that reality show Traders.
Yeah. That show is a perfect demonstration of the end game. Because the game has a fixed prize and a limited number of rounds, the incentive for long-term trust just evaporates near the end.
Right. The traders start turning on their own allies.
Indiscriminately. Because the low accountability and the fixed zero-sum prize compel them to make risky, non-cooperative moves. It shows that when the chance for a positive-sum outcome is gone, even the closest bonds just fall apart.
This idea of building a personal monopoly, a 0-to-1 existence, it goes way beyond tech. Historically, some individuals were masters at creating monopolies of desire and power. And my favorite example has to be the 17th century French philosopher and courtesan, Ninon de Blancos.
She is fascinating because for women in her time, the choice was basically marriage or the convent, and she just rejected both.
She created a third path, a personal monopoly. She invented a category for herself where she could compete purely on intellect and charm, not just on beauty. She was a true category of one in Paris.
And she didn't just compete, she strategically segmented her suitors to maintain complete control.
That's the amazing part. Tell us about the system.
It was a rigorous three-tiered system. First, she had the payers. They provided financial stability, but they received zero emotional intimacy. It was purely transactional.
Yeah.
Then she had the martyrs. They provided social validation. They were her devoted escorts, but they didn't consume her sexual resources.
And then the inner circle.
The favorites. And these were men chosen purely for her own pleasure or for their intellectual spark. By segmenting them, she avoided the zero-sum conflict of a traditional relationship. No single man could claim total control over her.
It's a pre-Thelian strategy for creating a personal 0-to-1 monopoly.
Absolutely.
And speaking of brilliant strategists, we have to talk about Cleopatra. Plutarch described her as having near magical charms, but her real power was her intellect, which she used to influence leaders like Antony.
Yeah, Plutarch saw her as this massive geopolitical force. Her real power was political skill and timing. And he observed that Antony's moral failure wasn't just falling for her, it was being seduced by his own success. Plutarch noted that Antony was only truly excellent when things were going wrong. When he was successful, he got soft, and that made him vulnerable to her influence.
And her suicide, planning it to avoid being paraded in Octavian's triumph, that was her final move.
The ultimate act of autonomy. Even in defeat, she controlled her own narrative.
Right.
So if scarcity creates this kind of leverage, does playing hard to get actually work today? Is that strategic or is it just manipulative?
That's the question, isn't it? And the research suggests it's really nuanced. Making your intentions too unclear can backfire, especially now when people value transparency.
But there's a balance. Conveying interest while still maintaining a bit of mystery or intellectual distance, that might help create that initial spark.
And the key here seems to be the transition over time.
Right. The rule is, scarcity creates desire early, but meaning sustains it later.
So you shift from a pursuit game, which is zero-sum, to a maintenance game.
Precisely. Long-term relationships have to become a positive-sum game. You have to focus on creating unique shared experiences. Studies consistently show that intimacy and partner responsiveness are what really correlate with sexual desire over the long haul.
So it's about building a unique world together that no one else can replicate.
That's your monopoly.
Okay, so if the problem is this mimetic, zero-sum dynamic, we need personal systems to protect ourselves. Because some people actively exploit these dynamics to control others.
Yes, and one of the most destructive mechanisms is intermittent reinforcement in unstable relationships.
The hot and cold push-pull cycle.
It's devastating because it creates a powerful addiction cycle in the person on the receiving end. The one delivering the reinforcement gets complete and absolute control by forcing their partner into this state of chronic anxiety.
I've heard therapists say it creates a kind of starvation. The lack of predictable care makes those rare moments of attention feel like salvation.
And that's why those relationships are so incredibly hard to leave. Your body is literally forced into withdrawal when that reinforcement is gone. Escaping that is the ultimate act of anti-competition. It's choosing your own wholeness over the tiny chance of winning their attention.
Which highlights the absolute need for boundaries. So what are the practical tools for you, the learner, to navigate this without falling into rivalry?
First, boundaries have to be clear, and they have to be framed around non-negotiable consequences. So instead of saying you shouldn't shout at me, which just invites an argument,
you make it about your action.
Exactly. The boundary is I will not stay in a conversation or a relationship with someone who verbally abuses me. It removes the ambiguity. It defines your space.
And setting those boundaries is so hard because it can feel rude. I know I have trouble with that phrase, I can help with X but not with Y. It feels so corporate.
It does feel clinical, but that's the point. It's a clear structure for managing your energy. Therapists recommend I can help with X, but not with Y, because it's efficient and non-emotional. You're saying no to the demand, but you're still showing a willingness to help in a way that respects your own limits.
It shifts it from a zero-sum demand to a positive offer.
That's it.
And finally, let's talk about the mindset shift, focusing on goals. It's the difference between trying to win and trying to build.
Right. Research clearly distinguishes between approach goals and avoidance goals. People with approach goals who are focused on fun, bonding, intimacy, they have much more satisfying relationships. They're building something unique.
And the competitive side is the avoidance goals.
That's right. Those relationships are focused on preventing conflict, avoiding rejection, or just not having the uncomfortable talk. And people with those goals, they experience lower satisfaction, lower responsiveness. You just can't create a 0-to-1 relationship, that personal monopoly, if all your energy is spent avoiding the negative.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground. We've connected the macro philosophy of escaping competition Teal's 0-to-1 all the way down to the micro strategy of navigating rivalry in our own lives, with lessons from Cleopatra, Ninon de Linclos, and modern boundary setting.
Yeah.
The common thread seems to be moving from imitation and scarcity to a creative space of uniqueness and abundance.
And this leaves us with a final provocative thought that connects all of it back to the individual. We talked about Peter Thiel, who champions this radical, anti-egalitarian pursuit of a monopoly.
Right, to drive civilization forward.
But he also financially backed the Hulk Hogan lawsuit against Gawker. And his argument was about protecting the privacy of vulnerable individuals, including people who might be outed as gay when their lives are in danger.
That's a fascinating tension. The ultimate capitalist funding an operation based on protecting vulnerability.
It really raises the question, if this pursuit of a personal or corporate monopoly is driven by escaping mimetic conflict, is this radical individualism ultimately a protective measure for superior people dictating their own existence? Or is it just a very sophisticated way of avoiding the messy, necessary work of building truly cooperative, egalitarian systems for everyone?
When you build your own monopoly, are you elevating yourself or are you just creating a safe zone?
Something for you to chew on until our next deep dive.